Now, Joseph was a priest of On. You can see that in the scriptures, but you could maybe we'll go to some of the scriptures. But in Egypt, IMHOTEP was the priest of On, which was Joseph. This reads by saying we can further associate Joseph with IMHOTEP through their connection with the old city of On. In the Greek, it's Heliopolis. It was said of IMHOTEP that he was the high priest of Heliopolis. This title relates to Joseph as well. According to the Genesis record, when Joseph was made vizier, he married Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest or prince of On. Now, you can go to Genesis 41 if you want to read it for yourself, the Bible record. Let's do that quickly. If you can't get there quickly, don't even go there, because I want to go through this quickly this evening. It's in chapter 41, verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Saphnath-Paaneah, or Saphnath-Paaneah. Translated using the Coptic language, it just means revealer of secrets, or to whom the man secrets are revealed. And he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. You might want to keep it open to Genesis. I might go back to it. This marriage squarely places Joseph in the family of the priesthood. It does not stretch the imagination to consider that because the Pharaoh proclaimed that he was a man of God, that he would become known as the high priest of On, or Heliopolis. Again, the ancient book of Jasher tells that Joseph built a temple within his own palace. He built a temple within his own palace. And that palace was likely enclosed within the enormous Zoser complex, which we will take a closer look at in the upcoming weeks, this Zoser complex. Within Joseph's Egyptian name is the goddess Nith, or Nath. So likewise, the name of his bride, Asenath, the goddess Nith, N-E-I-T-H, or N-I-T, or N-E-T, depending how you spell it, of Lower Egypt, which Lower Egypt is really northern Egypt, was a pre-dynastic war goddess, but she was revered as the wise one who resolved disputes among others. As a goddess of Lower Egypt helps confirm that Joseph was vizier within the dynastic headquarters residing in Lower Egypt. Once again, going from north to south, Lower Egypt was in the north part, and Lower Egypt was the north part, and Upper Egypt was in the south part of Egypt. Joseph's wife, Asenath, provides another interesting look. We must presume that this woman was a prominent figure of his era. She was the wife of Egypt's most loved vizier and the daughter of the priesthood. We have no hint whether her remains were also taken with Joseph's bones at the Exodus. We know when the children of Israel were finally delivered from Egypt, Moses leading the way, Joseph made sure his last command was that the children of Israel make sure they take his bones. Not body, bones, which we already covered, the significance of that, out of Egypt into the land of his fathers, to be buried there. As already noted, the spelling of her biblical name, Asenath, or Not, is associated with the goddess Neith, N-E-I-T-H. The city associated with the goddess Neith, as with Asenath, is Heliopolis, or On, O-N, in Lower Egypt. In latter times, the city of Sais, S-A-I-S, located in the Nile Delta, adopted Neith, or Neth, as their patron god. Of course, that was years later. Because Neith pre-existed Joseph's wife Asenath, we cannot credit Asenath as the originator of the Neith cult. A grave has been excavated at Saqqara, which is where the Zoser complex is located, which we'll get to later, where the 3rd and 4th dynasty kings were buried. It was the grave of Harris Mernith, M-E-R-N-E-I-T-H, also called Neith, N-E-I-T hyphen Hotep, H-O-T-E-P. It was a grave Harris Mernith, also called Neith Hotep, by archaeologist Flanders Petrie. Radiocarbon 14 dating of sealed reeds in her tomb placed her approximately a contemporary with IMHOTEP. How convenient. If this is Joseph's wife, she could be the mother of Joseph's children, Ephraim and Manasseh. It would be helpful to find the names of IMHOTEP and Pathotep's wives. But as yet, and it still is true today, there is no success. However, Neith Hotep serves hint. She not only had the Hotep name, but she lived in the proper era, in Dynasty 3. And she originated in the proper location. And where's that proper location? Heliopolis, or On. It is not yet refuted that Joseph, IMHOTEP, Pathotep all had the same wife, Neith Hotep. If we are to successfully complete the connection of Joseph with Dynasty 3 and with IMHOTEP, it is important that the geography of Egypt is compatible with a revised chronology, which we've been looking at. The land given to Israelites, Goshen, which would be in Lower Egypt, the land where the Nile Delta was located, which would be in the very northern part of Egypt as we would map things today, that went all the way up to the banks of the Mediterranean Sea. The land given to Israelites, Goshen, was near the treasure cities that they would build. Ramses, both are believed to be in Lower Egypt. The 3rd dynasty's capital was at Memphis, less than 20 miles from the Israelite settlement of Goshen. Not only Joseph placed them, his family, in prime land, and he kept them separated for a reason which we'll look at later, because they were shepherds. And I'm sorry, I used to believe this, but after further investigation, I've concluded they were not the Hyksos like some believed, as I was taught. It was not the Hyksos. Yes, the Hyksos was known as the shepherd kings, and I'll get to that, maybe not tonight, next time. Yes, the Hyksos was known as shepherd kings, but that's too generic, because you could place the Hyksos around most of the Syro-Canaan area, or in today's map, northern Iraq, most of Syria, Lebanon, even parts of Turkey in today's map, where we would locate that area. And there were many shepherd kings, including competing shepherd kings in the Hyksos tribal communities. And they were not liked. Unfortunately, the Hebrews were also shepherds. And Egyptians didn't like shepherds. And Joseph gave them the prime land. And for the most part, he kept them separate from the Egyptians for a purpose. And we'll take a look at that probably a different night. Now back to this. Joseph could be associated with On's priesthood. Well, let me go back. The third dynasty capital was Memphis, less than 20 miles from the Israelite settlement of Goshen. Joseph, in those days, that was considered close. To us, it's nothing. You get in a car, you're there in 20 minutes. Even though it seems far, if you don't have a vehicle, he didn't locate him in Upper Egypt, which would have been hundreds and hundreds of miles away. He relocated everyone that came in from Canaan, Jacob and his family, around 70 people, into the most prime area. Just put it this way. Wherever you're living, say you're living in an average neighborhood, you kind of know where the Beverly Hills, or not even Beverly Hills, the Bel Air, if you're living out here in the West Coast, is located. The prime land, the land that everybody would like to live in if they could afford it. That's what Joseph did for Jacob and his family, his father and his family. He put them in prime real estate. And being shepherds, it was ideal to be placed in the area that they can flourish with their livestock. And not to mention, eventually, the agricultural benefits from being in such an area, rich from the Nile, nourishment coming from the river, and the sediments and minerals and byproducts that would cause that land to bloom. You could plant a 2x4 and a tree would come out. I remember not too long ago, about 20 years ago, I bought a piece of property. It was in horse country. I lived there for a short time, less than 2 years. The property came with more responsibility than I was willing to give it because I was busy doing other things. But while I was there, because it was horse country, and it basically was up against the hillsides, it was land that you could plant a 2x4 and a tree would grow. It was amazing how nourished that soil was. Now, most of our soil is depleted from all those things. That's why we don't get as many nutrients in our foods these days, because of soil depletion. I'm sure that was depleted to a certain degree too, but for what I was used to, you could plant anything on the soil. And it would just grow. You could leave it alone and not even take care of it, and it would grow. That's the kind of area. And then even what I described to you, 100 times better. Joseph planted his family into this area. And that's why they took off. That's why they flourished. That's why their population just multiplied tremendously in a very short amount of time, you really think about it. And that's why eventually, when pharaohs would come in that would not know Joseph, they feared these shepherds. But anyway, that's jumping the gun. I don't want to get into that far into teaching tonight. So let's go back to this. The third dynasty capital was Memphis, less than 20 miles from the Israelite settlement of Goshen. Goshen is even more local to the city of On, which was almost a suburb of Memphis. It would be convenient for Joseph to be given a wife from On. And in this situation, Joseph could be associated with On's priesthood and still be close to the ruling capital. Is it coincidence that, like Joseph, both IMHOTEP and PATHOTEP were at Memphis also? Another coincidence. Likewise, is it mere chance that Path was that city's god? Well, that's what it eventually became. During most of Egypt's history, the capital of most dynasties was in Upper Egypt. Once again, to remind you, Upper Egypt is in southern Egypt. According to modern historical opinion, the Israelites' stay in Egypt was during the period when the capital was in Upper Egypt, yet this is directly contrary to geographical logistics, because the land of Goshen was in Lower Egypt. Joseph's era in Egypt was Lower Egypt, close to the city of On and Memphis, just as his wife was associated with this area. As we will see, in the days of Moses, when the Israelites built the city of Ramses, they did not build the cities in Upper Egypt. All the activities of the Israelites in Egypt from Abraham to Moses were activities conducted in Lower Egypt, which would make sense because that's where their population lived. Unfortunately, for the historians, they must place the activities of Moses and Joseph in Upper Egypt due to the misdating of the Israelite period. Egyptologists thought IMHOTEP was connected to the royal family by marriage. While IMHOTEP himself was evidently not a king's son, he may have been connected to the royal house by marriage. That's what they're saying about IMHOTEP. Well, that's what I just read to you in Genesis 41:45. Because the same seems to apply to Joseph when you read the Bible record. It is known that during the Old Kingdom, the priesthood had close family ties with royalty. Therefore, we may safely assume that the marriage of Joseph connected him with the royal household. Joseph's father-in-law serves hint of this royal connection. According to the account in Genesis, this Potipharah, or Petiphress, another way of saying it, now a priest of On, is the same name as he who was previously called head cook or captain of the guard, and to whom Joseph was sold. The testament of Joseph in section 18, the Antiquities of the Jews, affirms this, for there he is said to have married the daughter of his master and mistress. Nor is this a notion peculiar to that testament, as other historians confess. It is an idea common to Josephus, to the Septuagint interpreters, and to the other learned Jews of the old time. There is an additional documentation to confirm Joseph's regal connection, as attested among the royal sepulchres. It was common in ancient Egypt for the chief stewards to the king, such as the chief of the guards, to be family members. Nephews and nieces of the king were the most entrusted subjects of the king because they had the most to lose if the king were deposed. Therefore, it was advantageous for the king to have his chancellor, in this case Joseph, married into the royal family. If IMHOTEP was a member of the royal family by marriage, and Joseph was a member of the royal family by marriage, then perhaps they are the same person. Though this royal connection appears to be a remote parallel between Joseph and IMHOTEP, so far there is no proof they are not the same person. Let's move on. I want to do something else because I'm running out of time. IMHOTEP's missing tomb. For years, archaeologists have searched for a tomb or any indication of IMHOTEP's personal burial place. Until recently, Egyptologists had no physical evidence that IMHOTEP ever even existed. Fortunately, as we previously already took care of that issue, because there is evidence that he now existed, now that they know he was more than just a legend, but there is still no tomb. not considered Joseph. In the Genesis record, in Genesis 50, verse 25, it reads, "And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence," which we already covered. You're not going to find a body of Joseph in Egypt. And they surely haven't found, up to this point, a body of IMHOTEP in Egypt either. But there's yet to be discovered one. But there's no doubt that Egyptologists today are convinced that IMHOTEP exists, even though they can't find his body, because of what records they do have that proves that he exists. But here's the thing. There's no tomb. Now, there's been some, and I've read this before in the past, they found like a pyramid, small little tiny pyramid that would fit a body at a location. And maybe or maybe not, it was Joseph's tomb. I'm not going to get into it now, because I don't think it's really pertinent, because I'm not convinced it was Joseph's tomb or not. If it was, the body's no longer there. And of course, some say that if it was IMHOTEP's or Joseph's body, grave robbers took it. Well, that's a convenient excuse. But it could be. It could have been a temporary holding place for Joseph's body. Before the Israelites left Egypt, he would be stored there, entombed there, placed there, waiting for that day, or maybe not. All we know for sure is Joseph's body is not found there, and IMHOTEP's body is not found there, and also PATHOTEP has not been found. The Bible suggests that there was not a tomb for Joseph. Yes, of course there wasn't. No tomb for Joseph, no tomb for IMHOTEP. And to complete the picture, upon realizing that no tomb for PATHOTEP has ever been located either. Wow. Strike one, no tomb for Joseph. Strike two, no tomb for IMHOTEP. Strike three, and you're out, because there's no tomb for PATHOTEP too. Why? Because all three of those individuals were none other than Joseph of the Bible. And Joseph left town. The Israelites took his body, and he's buried in Israel. And to complete the picture, upon realizing that no tomb for PATHOTEP has been located either, our position that all three persons are the same individual is tentatively vindicated. We have associated both IMHOTEP and PATHOTEP as Joseph. Since both Joseph and IMHOTEP have no tomb, can we say the same for the vizier PATHOTEP? Historians have complained that the name PATHOTEP was adopted by many viziers after the original PATHOTEP. We already covered that. One PATHOTEP, spelled a little bit differently, was vizier IMHOTEP. And of course, you could place that vizier in Dynasty 5. His tomb has been discovered and is a popular tourist site. But he was a vizier in the late Dynasty 5 period. And we know Joseph was in Dynasty 3 in the early parts of Dynasty 4. Viziers cleared up to the 18th dynasties are known for their proverbs of wisdom. Historians perceive that they seem to copy their wisdom, and even said that the accomplished age for a vizier was age 110. Therefore, many of those viziers are said to have died at 110 years. They all seem to have copied some original PATHOTEP. The first known PATHOTEP was the one who posted his wise instructions to a son of Pharaoh, Huni, which was named Kagemi. This was the original PATHOTEP, the one who died at 110. And yes, true to our model, the tomb of this PATHOTEP have never been discovered. I mean, pieces of information just keep adding on, just keep piling on. No missing, no body ever was found for Joseph in Egypt. Nobody was ever found for IMHOTEP in Egypt. Nobody was ever found for PATHOTEP in Egypt. Egyptologists don't deny that they existed. Well, maybe Joseph they deny, the more stubborn ones, but the serious ones that take a look at this information have concluded PATHOTEP existed and IMHOTEP existed, but they can't find. They found a lot of other bodies, but they can't find these two important individuals in their early history. Why? Because he was Joseph. And Joseph, like I said, left town. He's buried in Israel today. And recently a whole fuss has been made about his burial site and the circumstances surrounding it. That's because he's buried in Israel. It's just another piece of evidence that says, hey, you have to stop and take a look at this. These things are just not one coincidence on top of another on top of another. Remember I told you how statistics work? The improbability of this not being Joseph is getting to be something you cannot ignore. Now, I'm running out of time tonight to go any further, but I do want to look at the flawed Hyksos theory and why. I'm going to go deep into it. I'm just going to cover it just briefly because I don't think it really needs that much attention. But some of you might get confused and try to place the shepherd kings of the Hyksos clan with the Hebrews. They weren't. They weren't, my friends. That's a whole other group of people. And no, you can't use that excuse, because the problem is, if you're going to apply the Hyksos theory, then you have to take Joseph of the 3rd and 4th dynasty and now place him centuries later into the 18th dynasty. Well, that's not going to fit the timeline, is it? And that's why the Hyksos theory is flawed, and that's what I'll cover next time. Play a song. I wish we had more time tonight, but we'll get to it next week. I want to hear from you.